Raquel, welcome. Oh, Cammy. Thank you. I want to give hugs, but I'll save it. I'll save it. You got it. No. Oh, I have a timer. Let me look at that. Okay. How's everybody doing? Oh, y'all look so good. It smells like shea butter and joy and all that. Okay, so I'm going to start with Nneka. We're talking about vulnerability. I'm a psychologist, so I deal in vulnerability for a living, which is really tough in the Black realm because we are very much given messages, whether overtly or covertly, about not being able to share our most vulnerable selves. And self-love and Black love is also being transparent and feeling comfortable doing that. So I'm going to start with someone who gets to document that for a living. Nneka, your career includes multiple documentaries, docuseries, and unscripted work, which is probably the most vulnerable you can get without a script. You even won an Emmy. We're going to say your first Emmy because there will be many more, for directing Lizzo's Give It Up for the Big Girls. What is it about you that helps you tell these stories?
Well, actually, before I actually got into film, I actually studied psychology. And I really was one of those kids who always asked a lot of questions, always sitting on the couch with old folks, my grandmother in church, asking a lot of questions. So I've always been a very naturally curious person. But I'm always wanting to unearth people's shadow side, the unconscious. And so I use film as a way to kind of study psychology. So I'm studying the human condition, but I'm doing it through entertainment rather. So I have a lot of big artists. I've done stuff with Lizzo, Obama, many others. And like really it's about getting to the bottom of how do we unbecome and unlearn, you know, the things that we're taught to become our true selves. And so that requires a lot of vulnerability on the talent's behalf, but also on my behalf, to really be able to give of myself so that they can open up. So that's what really led me to it.
Yeah, and have you always had a gift for making others feel comfortable to be vulnerable? Because as a psychologist, it's an honor to let people share things with me that they may not accept with themselves. But in a space where we're Black people and we're taught like you got to be strong, you got to do everything. It's how do you make people feel vulnerable enough to say, all right, she cool. I could say something to her.
I come from a family of truth tellers, and I've always lived an authentic life. Like you cannot be in my household and not like deal with the truth. We're just blunt, honest, and tell it like it is. I come from that family, and so I feel like in truth, there you create connection because a lot of times when we're not our true selves or we don't tell the truth about how we actually feel, we end up like isolating people and ourselves, and become oppressed. And like the way to fight oppression is through truth. And so I think that's been something that I've really implemented in my life just from having honest, bold New York family. And then also me being authentic as myself, you know, being able to have to like come out during like, you know, in the Black church and just like coming and being true to myself. I feel like I was faced with having to be honest very early on. And that led me to just allow people to be their true selves. And then when I interview people, I don't judge them for their responses. I meet people where they're at. So I just record the truth and let that play out and see what we could learn from each other through that.
Yeah, I get that. I'm from Philly, so like it's intense. You got to be quick witted and quick with it because they're gonna come for you since toddler. So next for Cammy, you've been a beauty queen, a model, and a TV host. You've been in the public eye for a minute. How do you maintain a sense of self and authenticity on the main stage and on the big screen?
Ooh, well, I am the oldest of 6 girls, and if you know anything about sisters, whether they're younger than me or not, they act like they are my older sisters every day. And they tell me about myself, whether I like it or not. We have a very honest, open family, East Coasters as well. We're from Maryland. My mom is Jamaican, so like you know, honesty in a Caribbean household is you're gonna hear it. You're gonna hear it, and they also keep you humble, but they also remind you of how special you are and how what you have is unique. And I feel like, you know, it's been a blessing to be able to build a career off of just being myself. I've been able to build a brand off of that. So I've never had to be anybody else. And when I tried that in the beginning, in my pageant days, you know, you try to fit the mold of what you think a beauty queen is supposed to be like. It wasn't working for me. Like when I decided I wanted to become a TV host and I actually started working towards it and working with a coach, I realized that I wasn't connecting with whoever was behind the lens because I was just talking just to talk. And I made a decision to just radically be myself and see what that would get me. And it got me really, really far. And then when I ended up booking Catfish, that was my big break at 25. I'd been working as a host for 7 years up until that point. And the production was like, you're great. Just like, do you. All those faces you make, do them. Like, everything you say it. Because I had to be like, is this okay? Like, is this cool for TV? Like, am I allowed to say that? And they're like, say whatever it is that you want to say. And I feel like I've been able to just be myself authentically the entire time, and I'm not going back, that's for sure.
Don't ever go back. You know, most of the time people will talk about black people will code switch, but most of the time what we're doing is not code switching. Code switching is going back and forth between language. Most of the thing that burns us out is masking. We create whole avatars, changing your hair, changing your posture, changing the way you talk, changing the way you laugh. You don't laugh like that. Don't nobody laugh like that. You know, you run to laugh. Like, you know, you throw your whole body back, right? And if it's one thing I try to teach people as a psychologist who specializes in black mental health, you can be you. People gonna like you for you, or they gonna dislike you for you. But you can be you. Because if they don't like you, they're not gonna like you no way. You could be on your best behavior. You could be having a worse day, still don't like it. Oh, because you don't like me.
And that's why I always say if they don't like it, they can change the channel. There's a million channels. We got DirecTV, we got Netflix, we got Hulu, we got options. So you can always, if you don't like what you see, you can go somewhere else.
Yes, be yourself. So as someone who, we're talking about vulnerability, we have Willie, who really, you're writing via We the Urban has been an incredible gift. Allowing folks to feel seen and connect. And if it's something that we all need as black people is to feel seen with your brand and with each other. Why did you decide to step out from behind the cell phone and actually share your name and your face and be vulnerable with the page that everyone knows and loves anyway? Like if I see a certain sepia tone and a certain font, I know it's We the Urban. Why'd you decide to show your face with that and be vulnerable?
Yeah, I feel like I've been in the shadows for so long, and a huge part of that was really strategic. I feel like social media has like convinced us that we all need to be, famous or an entertainer, and I feel like that does not come naturally to everybody, and that is okay. And also social media now, like I think that's why we don't see a lot of people posting like on their feeds, because back in the day, like the Tumblr days, it used to feel like community and it was more about the art. And now when you post, it just feels like you're being stared at and judged. And there's like this fear of being perceived that I've had. And writing this book for the past 3 years, I've been thinking about like this month specifically, knowing that I'd have to show my face and sort of push through that fear. And I'm learning the more that I do that, the more that I sort of acknowledge fear and, hear it but not listen to it and just do it anyway. I find that like afterwards, I'm like, that was actually not that bad, and can we do it again? And I also think there's just something really important about seeing somebody that looks like me, that comes from the same walk of life as me, because we don't get to sit in these seats a lot. And I think there's something powerful about people seeing that this kid from the South from humble beginnings is the one that's actually inspiring them. And it feels good. It feels good to be seen.
Yeah, because you don't have to fight off every single emotion. Most of the time I tell my patients, name your emotion. If your anxiety is Sheila, tell Sheila to go sit down. Oh, is anybody Sheila? My bad. My bad. But you know, you don't always have to fight off every single emotion. Sometimes it's also helpful to realize that they exist because you don't have to combat everything. Everything doesn't have to be intellectualized. You could say, Sheila, I see you. Go sit down, have a butterscotch. I don't know, but I have to work on something. So I acknowledge your presence. I'm not going to spend this energy fighting you. You can do things even when your voice shakes, right? Like I used to do public speaking all the time and my voice would shake. I still had to do it. Like I was getting graded on it, you know? So you can do things, name the emotion. Do not feel the need to fight off every single thing because that's also denying your humanity. And if it's anything that has been put on Black people, is denying the aspect that we are human. We're allowed to have emotions. You're allowed to have fear and vulnerability. You know, you're allowed to state that like, this is just very overwhelming. I'm gonna still do it. I wish it was easier, right? So you guys show vulnerability in so many different walks of life. This is going to be a question for every single person, right? When did you get to a space where you felt that it was okay to? You already actually shared when you shed, so I'm gonna skip you for this one. When when did you get to a space where you felt like being vulnerable was just, I don't want to say second nature, but you felt more comfortable standing in that space? And were there any emotions associated with it that you kind of had to shed at that moment too?
Yeah, for me, it really happened during the first lockdown, which was like the ascension of this new iteration of We the Urban, because I have been doing We the Urban since I was 14 years old, which was 2009. So it's sort of like my life's work. And it started as a magazine on Tumblr, and it was fashion and art and music and design. And I was just this young kid, like trying to figure out my lane in art. I knew I liked to curate, I knew I liked color, but it wasn't until that first lockdown when I was living in Hollywood, like a block away from Hollywood Boulevard, and it was like my empathy meter broke. I was so like, I didn't know what to do. All I knew was to write, just write. I took my platform. I had already been changing to more of an emotionally intelligent, socially aware content angle because obviously social media, like negativity is rewarded. And I am guilty of, I may have a Zeus subscription and I may not. And I kind of wanted to like make an antidote to all of that, especially during that time when we all felt so lost. And I'm sure like everyone in here knows somebody that passed during that time. It was really devastating. So when I first started putting things out, it was very much just like everything's gonna be okay. Very simplistic messages. And as I started, you know, going through things with relationships and my friends and interpersonal things during the pandemic, I realized that the only way for me to continue to create in the way that I guess social media forces you to, if it's your career, we know that the algorithm rewards consistency. It doesn't reward you for like taking care of yourself. And I realized the only way I could be that consistent and push out that much content is if I just write in real time about what I'm going through. And even though people haven't seen me, it's been so, there's like this reciprocal healing thing that happens because, you know, I went through a horrible breakup. Somebody dogged me out in ways that I don't even want to describe right now. But I had to write through that. And all of the posts, like everything, was really about that. But obviously, I make things vague so that they're relatable to everybody. But just to see people relate, to see people share, to see people message me like, "Hey, this word convinced me to leave my abuser," or just really powerful stories like that. It made me feel so much more safe to be vulnerable. And I realized that like my life is a testament to when you lean into like the purest expression of yourself, you find abundance. And I feel like we all have this like primal need to want to be seen and witnessed and validated. And I'm realizing even sitting here, that like you can't be seen, you cannot be witnessed if you hide yourself. So vulnerability is really a strength.
And what about you, Nneka? How has that been something in your life, personally and professionally?
I'll say like the personal and professional just actually intersected. So I've done a lot of commercial films, series, and television, but I was working on one particular project that had to do with trauma in the black church, which I grew up in black church. My grandfather was a pastor, my grandmother's a first lady, so very churchy growing up. In New York. And so I wanted to do a passion project about my experience, my experience watching people who had been pained in the black church, because I've only heard it from the perspective of people either hate the church or they love it. But I felt like I was in the middle. Like I love so much stuff about the spirit of connection, joy, black power, all these things from the church, but I can't love it without acknowledging the truth about the pain that it has caused me and some others. So I was like, how do we find a project that meets in the middle? I'm used to pointing the lens away from me and being able to like show my emotions through other people in my work. And I think that the studio was like, well, we need an anchor for this movie to drive it, and it should be you because this is your story. And I was like, what? And I didn't realize how much pain it had caused me. I had been fighting through it. I've been championing other people, but I hadn't been a champion for myself. I put my pain to the side to address other things, and I realized that that was actually the way I was coping, not healing, but just coping. And so I had to reopen up that wound recently in doing the passion project, and I had to put it down because I had other work to finish, and it was causing me to spiral, in terms of anxiety. And I'm used to being a person that doesn't even experience that because I'm like so focused on other people. But when I have to focus on myself, it's like, whoa, okay, we got some stuff going on here. And so I think that made me very vulnerable because in opening that up, you think the world has grown so much. There's so many different types of people politically and stuff like that, but we still have a long way to go. And so the face-to-face reality with that there's still so much hatred in our community, even though we need to move forward as a community and actually come together and fight, that reality that still existed was painful. And I'm not used to feeling that vulnerable. So to be honest, like I haven't even finished it yet. I'm still working on it. I put a piece of it out to the world, and so many people talked about how healing it was for them. But I was like, I need to step back, work through these emotions so I can not do this halfway. And so I think that's the most vulnerable I had to be, is when I had to put myself in my work. So yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned something so powerful with the black church and community, because the black church is the center for most of us in the aspect of the black community. But there's also this stressor with feeling as though if you pray enough that you won't have to deal with the pain, or feeling like it's you're not spiritual enough if you also need to see a clinician. As someone who is a psychologist, you can have Jesus and a counselor. You can have Jehovah and a professional clinical social worker. A lot of times there can be this thought process of like, what happens in the house stays in the house. And the house will be like the church, right? And where do you go if the place where you're receiving the pain is also from the church, right? And I, as a psychologist, I'm a person who always states that like therapy is not going to be for everybody. Therapy isn't the only path to healing, but no matter what path you take, it will be paved with community, right? So you don't have to go into this operation of thinking that you're not godly enough because you need someone else to talk to. You are not saved enough because the place that you go for spirituality and being saved is also the place that's hurting you. Both of those things can exist. It's called spiritual bypassing, if you guys want to Google it. But there's no amount of prayer that is going to make it so that you can outwork all of the mental health issues. You have to also believe that God mentioned that He works through people. Right? So you got clinical psychologists, you got professors, you have scientists, you have family members, you have credentialed people, right? If you believe in God, where you think he told me to go to school to help you, like you ain't just meet me, So like, I'm just saying, I'm not saying if you believe in God, God works through people. Amen. So I'm just putting that out there. I love a good call and response. Do it again. God works through people. Amen. So let me ask you more questions for everybody. What do you think? You've actually already answered this one. I'm skipping everybody. What have you done professionally that has made you feel the most naked? Let's start right here.
Ooh. Well,
I know, and with that thigh out too.
well, I know. I was gonna say, as someone who is literally in Sports Illustrated swimsuit, I can tell you that I was more comfortable with that than I was when I first launched my podcast, Relationship. It's a relationship advice podcast, and I launched it while I was in the midst of a bad relationship, and I was like, I knew that it was bad. And I knew from the topics that I really wanted to discuss on the podcast that I was not speaking in truth entirely. And, you know, my podcast, every single episode, no matter what the topic is, if it's toxic relationships, if it's, we talk about astrology, we talk about all kinds of things on the podcast. But we have people who write in and say, this is what I'm dealing with, what's your advice? And I was just like looking at myself in the mirror like, you got a lot of gall and audacity to be on this podcast giving people advice about their relationships and knowing damn well that everything in the buttermilk in your house is not clean. And I had to have a come to Jesus moment and obviously broke up with him. And I then had to talk about that because people from the outside were looking at my relationship as if it was like this beacon of black love and hope. And I'm like, y'all don't have any idea what this is even like. You're only seeing what I put out there. You're only seeing the highlight reel. You're only seeing the Instagram posts that I put out after we've been in an argument that led me to tears where I'm writing my caption that's so like loving and nice. And that's not actually what's happening. And I take accountability for that, and I had to do that on my podcast to be like, I know that you guys have been seeing these things, and I was getting so many messages like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys broke up. You were like a couple goals for me. I'm like, what? That's why I always tell people, like, you can't pay attention to celebrity couples, things that you see. If you don't know these people in real life, then you do not know these people in real life. You don't know what is going on. And every relationship has problems. No relationship is perfect. But not all relationships are bad and toxic either. And so I had to do an episode about me being single for the first time in a long time. And I had to be honest. And that felt very, very naked for me. But it really did unlock a new level of vulnerability for me because from that point on, I feel like my audience was able to trust me more. I was able to really dive deeper into conversations. When I found my good love that I have now, I was able to share it, and people were so excited for me, and it just gave me a different level of perspective. So it ended up working out, but I was so scared. I was sweating when I posted that.
And where's that good love? Where's that person from?
He's from Philly.
He's from Philly.
From West Philly, actually.
Actually, as soon as she said he's from Philly, I said, oh, I'm sorry.
She did.
I said, does he have a beard?
He does.
Yeah.
But not a Philly beard, apparently.
Not a Philly beard.
I didn't know there was a difference.
There's a difference. You know, I'm just saying. So he's a good one, you know. There are probably none left. But
I got the last one,
you got the last one.
Right off the shelf.
But what about you, Willie? What have you done professionally that has made you feel the most naked?
I think releasing this book is probably the most naked I have felt because I've never worked harder on anything in my life. Like, it is truly 30 years of hard-earned wisdom, and it has been like the biggest priority of my life the past 3 years. And every pixel, every word, every page, every color is so intentional. And it's the first time I actually got to do long form writing because I've always done 3 to 5 sentences and had not had a lot of experience and honestly didn't even consider myself a writer until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I still don't feel like some all-knowing being, but I know that I've been through some stuff, and I put all of that into the book. And the book is sectioned into 6 chapters, and the chapters are really broad themes, so peace, love, creativity, well-being. And for each of these essays that I had to write, my life was like the complete antithesis. So for the peace section, I was dealing with so much violence and really like a really dark time for a few months. But I'm on a deadline, and a publisher has invested all this money, and there's a print schedule, and I have to sit here and write about peace as I am going through the worst time in my life right now. But somewhere through that process of writing it out and just writing through pain and creative blocks, I feel like I freed myself. And it was the most vulnerable experience. So I think this book is really, like my love letter to the world, like my whole heart, everything.
I love that. And you may have another. Do you have anything else where you feel as though, Nneka, that you felt the most naked in working? Because when I was looking at all your interviews, you also mentioned your first documentary was because you felt as though there was kind of a dichotomy within like the LGBTQIA community. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, the first film I did was called The Same Difference. It was about internalized homophobia within the community, which a lot of people think just because you're within a community that discrimination doesn't exist. But there was all this like, you can't be too feminine if you're supposed to be masculine and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I like to get my hair done. I like to look pretty. I like to get my nails done. Like, where are these rules coming from? And so I noticed that within the community, a lot of masculine identified lesbians were taking the toxic male figures that they were seeing and trying to implement that energy into a community full of women. And so I wanted women to feel okay with vulnerability however they present, whether it's feminine, masculine, in between. We should be comfortable being whoever we are. This should be a safe space. So the film was about that, but really it was my first film. I had worked at like Viacom, BET, MTV, VH1, like the first 7 years of my career. I look a lot younger than I am, but the first 7 years of my career, I started working on that. And so I was like, you know what, I wanna make my own films, but I'm gonna do my first film based on something I'm experiencing. I don't feel like I belong to this community, I don't understand it. So I'm gonna do a film to help us see and put a mirror up to ourselves on how we're treating each other. But at that time, I didn't feel so naked. I was just kind of like, what's wrong with us? Like, come on, y'all, let's get this together. It's okay, we need to be connected. So that's where I was with that. But I feel like I felt more naked when the show that I got an Emmy for, I came in there disrupting things. I'm naturally a provocateur and a disruptor just by the fact that I'm a Black woman directing a series, and I got 100 people working for me under me, and they're like been working before I was born, and so people look at you like, oh, you're a woman, you're Black, you don't know what you're doing, and I came in there changing everything. I don't want those tripods, take those off. I want you to really move with the women. I want the people who are working on this to feel the empathy of the women, so when people are watching this on screen at home, it feels real, it feels alive. And when I said that, there was a lot of questioning, trying to restructure things. It was intense, and through that process, I was able to find really strong confidence in my voice. But the first day, it was like 100 people, like, you're dealing with people, and you have to navigate the language to get people to do and execute your vision. And I think that's when I saw like, wow, I didn't notice there was so much discrimination specifically towards women and Black women in this field. And I was the first woman ever, first Black female director ever to win that award, or any Black person to win the Outstanding Director Award in that category in history. Thank you. So I say that to say vulnerability is good because it can like empower you. That anxiety can turn into like fierce vision and strategy. Like the fact that they made me nervous, I'm in New York, I'm like, what? Come on, we taking these tripods off. We're gonna do it this way. And it turned out to such a huge hit for Amazon, and it was so beautiful to work on with those girls who gave me their hearts on set. Lizzo gave her heart on set. All those people, I feel like it was just such a beautiful experience and story to tell. So I needed to make sure that the crew knew, get used to Black women doing this, and then to win the award, which I didn't even know that was an option. I didn't know that was Emmy was even on the way. But to see how that story landed, I hope it gave the message out there to women, Black women all across the world that like stick to your vision. no matter what you say, no matter how they try to throw you off your game or make you feel like you crazy, like your vision, stay true to it no matter what. So I feel like I felt naked, but at the end, funny enough, the episode was called Naked that we won the Emmy for. So.
Yeah, like you mentioned a lot about like limiting beliefs, and as a community, like Black people, a lot of us have some aspect of internalized oppression, right? But saying it's solely internalized oppression really takes away from the onus of who put that impression on us. So when you're thinking about it, I want you to actually think about it as injected oppression that turns into internalized, right? Because somebody only has to tell you you are unworthy 5 times. Someone only has to tell you are not intelligent 5 times. Someone only has to tell you that you're too loud 5 times. You will tell yourself that same message the 6th, right? So vulnerability will also take you, you're gonna have to combat those limiting beliefs, right? Like you gotta really think about like when these automatic messages come in your mind, when these feelings come up, feelings are not facts, they're just cues, right? Like I often feel as though, I don't know, I feel like my husband should give me everything I want. Is that gonna happen? No, but feelings are very much cues into you ask yourself questions about them. So if you're also gonna be vulnerable, you also have to think about your automatic thoughts that may limit you. Don't automatically assume that that's just how it is. It's injected oppression that goes into internalized oppression, and y'all can come, that's what Black love is as well. So as we wrap up, I want everyone to leave us with something. If you have someone who's struggling with vulnerability, or if they're struggling with acceptance, or if they're struggling with, I don't know, stepping into their truth, what's one message that every single person, what would you give to them?
I think when it comes to any type of public image or persona that you're putting out there, not everyone's gonna like it. I actually had a ex-boyfriend one time who told me, so one of the things that I actually remember that he said, people don't like what they don't understand. And some people may not understand my humor, my confidence, my compassion, my anything, my vulnerability. And if they don't like it, that's okay. There are other places for you. The block button is there, the unfollow button is there, the remote is there. And so I think that we have to remember that my mom always says, no one is you and that is your power. You have to know that what you have is special. And I think that that is critical, not just for, putting yourself out there to the world, but also in your dating lives and in your relationships, and knowing and being secure in the love that you have with this person who is with you because you are you. You don't have to be anybody else. And if you're with someone that makes you feel like you do, you're probably not with the right person.
Yeah, notice she said X. She did not say
X. He didn't make it.
He didn't make it. Yeah. Oh no. We're so sad for him. Yeah.
Fortunately for him.
But also, if they're deciding that they don't want to understand you, if that's their intent, they're not going to try, right? You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. Some people make it a point to be like, "Oh, what do you mean? You just can't stand people." I said, "I don't like you." I'm sure there are plenty of other people that are pleasant. You're just not one of them. So also don't feel the need to try to. Some people will make it a point to try to confuse, like, I don't understand, and it's not my job to try to teach you.
They misunderstand on purpose, and it happens all the time. So bye.
Bye. What about you, Willie?
Honestly, I second that. That was a word. I think I would say you don't need everybody to like you. You don't like everybody.
You don't like everybody.
It's impossible. And my motto is like, I don't need everyone to like me. I just want to make sure the people that do feel fed and are okay and feel loved, and more people can join if they like, but if not, then that is just none of my business. And to just, for like people creating, people that feel like they're posting and I only get 50 likes and it's never gonna happen for me and everybody has all these things and I don't, stop and just keep going. Just keep creating. I'm somebody that had like 50 likes for years and years. They say it takes like 10 years to be an overnight success. For me, it took a little bit longer. So I just wanna empower people to like keep that creative endurance, and even if you don't feel like it, do it. And even if there is fear present, act.
I love your energy, by the way. You're just so like sultry. Right? I would say there's a few things I would say, but I think one thing I would say is stay open, because I think rigidity is what like really, really separates us from our truth. When we're rigid, we're supposed to be like that. My mother told me that. This is how I planned my life. And part of vulnerability is opening yourself up to change and difference and how things can shift for you. Because I notice a lot of people stop being vulnerable when they get in a transition state. A relationship doesn't work out, a job doesn't work out as planned. You don't have you didn't have the child or the life you expected. Whatever it is, I feel like that's when we shut down. But I think sometimes being still in those moments of transition and less rigid will allow us to be more vulnerable. Because when I was in the car and my friend's like, "What's your panel about today?" I was like, vulnerability. She was like, "They called you?" And I was like, "Oh man," but I'm working on that. But she did say that. But I feel like what has helped me, because I've been shifting a lot as a result of that film that I told you about. But I think being open, staying open to the possibility of oneself and not being avoidant. Because if you're an end result person like me, let's say you do choose the road where you decide not to be less vulnerable or to be avoidant, then do you grow? Are you going to get to your end result of success? No. So you cannot skip the hard work of opening yourself up to your truth. Even if it hurts, even if it's not how you want to present yourself as strong and you got it all together. So that's what I would say. Like, don't avoid, be still, sit in the vulnerability, let it linger, so we could all sound like him.
Oh, sultry. Yeah, because I ain't got a therapeutic time. I'll be like, "What you feeling today? Tell me about it." Yeah. So thank y'all so much for sharing this aspect of vulnerability.
Thank you all.